Well, I mean, I can tell you a million stories. And I have a huge archive of that stuff. I want to donate it. I don't know. So now I'm downsized. It's just me. I do my trend tale when everybody asks me. I'm going to show two tonight. If there's absolutely subscribe to it, if there's no subscribe. And actually, I have a company before this I just spoke to when I first met Brett and my company in Logan. And it's just crazy for my work. It's much more, well, one thing's more fun.
Oh my God.
It's much
What's happening?
What's going on?
I started our YouTube live, but now the camera turned off.
Our camera?
Yeah, it was working literally right when I pressed start.
I talked to you a few years ago. Chris, do you know why that would have happened?
And then it started a whole new one. So it started, so this one I can't see anything, but then...
But it is streaming.
Yeah, but I must have set up two, because this is the one connected to this. So I'm guessing...
So just do that one.
Yeah, but this is watching.
Can't afford it, so they think that's the reaction.
Well, aren't they watching through, it doesn't show, like 8 people watching. But this is the one that pays with one person doing just this. So can you run both?
I don't know. I think you can. This one says maybe at 6 will pop. I'm confused.
Oh gosh,
Because it should like pop up with the camera, unless when I started doing it, it started
No, you have it set with this, so.
I think because I'm now living on this one, it takes the camera off.
this is what I see our.
Yeah, that's what I.
Oh, so you see nothing right now?
Yeah, it's down. It's perfect.
I'm just afraid because there's two live showing up. Two live.
Yeah, right here, it's showing this on the computer now. So I think that's right.
Yeah, the thing is, I think there's two live going, and so the one.
You're going from and $30 live, and then she showed it last year. Did you like that or not? Oh, I did. But I at that point never went with that. So basically,
Yeah, it started all over.
Managed questions. Both will need to be on our social answering messages.
I showed it all the time.
I think because it's this one is like.
No, you don't have a stream. It's only going to stream.
No, I know, but so it's already been like once it starts.
Once it starts,
I think when it ended that one.
Do we want to be clear about sending people to one channel?
Yeah, if it ends up being that other channel, it's easy, like, I can go on the Facebook and adjust it. Yeah.
Do you want me, for the 12 people waiting in this, should I send them the link?
Is there another link? Is there two links?
Because if they're watching it right now, and I can put in the comment saying, hey,
That's right.
I mean, I don't know. This is so fun. Yeah, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, okay, well, good meeting you. I hear you.
So cool, isn't that?
We're into Mary Go. So pretty with the
Natalie, can you track Mary down?
Yeah.
different narrative. Isn't it pretty with the scenery? Well, I love that picture of you.
Surf up TV with that. She's got such a good eye. She knows how to make everybody. TV. She's a fashion photographer here.
Oh, nice. Oh, well, we were early.
Okay. And then this is working because we've got the music coming through it, so.
Come sit.
No, I can't. Hello?
Testing.
You can hang on to yours, we both have our own.
Okay.
Yeah, but just let us know when it's ready to go up tonight.
Yes, it's live on YouTube and LinkedIn, and people are viewing this the right one.
I think we're gonna get going. you, everybody, for braving this cold weather. And those of you who were sensible and stayed home, thank you for joining us remotely. We're going to have a wonderful conversation today. I am beyond delighted to be hosting Sharon Graubard today. I'm going to give you a little background information. I had the opportunity to meet Sharon a couple of years ago. She was a guest on our second season of the podcast, Clothing Culture. And we just had an instant appreciation for each other's vision. Sharon is a poet, an artist when it comes to trend forecasting, and she knows how to look at the world and through this beautiful, unique perspective that she has and understand what is on the horizon. This talent of hers has really supported her in a really wonderful career. She's the founder and creative director of SG Files, a fashion forecasting consulting agency with an international following. In addition, she creates trend-driven content noted in forecasting publications. She's been included in states like A. Milano, FGI Communique, Design Contest Paris, California Apparel News, and previously held VP Creative Director post for Toby Donner, ESP Trendlab, Style Site, WGSN. It goes on and on, the number of places that have been able to really appreciate her expertise. Most recently, she's got a subscription service, Mint Moda, and she's had to make a career for a little while. She began as a textile artist and fashion illustrator, and those illustrations have been seen in many wonderful publications such as 17, Glamour, Self magazines, and she's known for these compelling trend presentations, which we'll get a little glimpse of at the end of our Q&A today. Many industry favorites, such as Premier Vision in Paris and Hong Kong Fashion Week, have brought her expertise in to share her insight. And she's a regular guest lecturer at universities such as FIT, Parsons, and now Washington University. I consider her an oracle. Many people out there consider her an oracle, and people recognize this by quoting her in their publications, such as the New York Times, Sourcing Journal, WWD, NPR, and of course, Clothing Culture. We all love her. So,
Thank you.
Sharon, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. What an introduction. Okay.
Is your microphone
I
working?
don't know.
Let's take a look. Can you hear her?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, let's give people a little insight into your background. When did you know that fashion was your passion, and then how did you carve out this niche? When did trend forecasting become your thing?
Well, it all kind of happened naturally. I mean, I always loved fashion. And I remember driving my mother crazy because the fashion was pointy shoes in the 60s, and I needed round toes. And we went from store to store, and she was like, they don't exist. And when I started, I started illustrating, I kind of knew, like, the shoulders were going to get rounder. There was this whole thing in the 80s, it was all mini skirts. And for some reason, I kept wanting to draw to the knee. And everyone was like, that's the dowdiest length, that's the dumpiest length. And then Calvin Klein did it. So then I knew I had the knack.
So you have been invited to so many illustrious events, and you are a regular resource. A lot of career highlights must be experienced all throughout your time in this space. Is there one in particular that stands out to you as, wow, that was such a cool experience?
Well, I always think of this time I presented in Sao Paulo, and so many times when I present internationally, like in Hong Kong, everyone speaks English. You know, you're in Europe, everyone's Sweden. I've done a lot of work in Scandinavia. They speak English better than we do. And I was in Sao Paulo, and I worked with the translator. It was like at the UN. she was in a booth and she was translating, and I could feel the audience with me. And at the end, the translator and I just embraced because everyone got it.
It was like a duet.
It was like a duet. I talked to her ahead of time about any fashion terms that I might use, and I don't know, it was just, you know what it is? Fashion forecasting is communication. And I always tell students, you've got to know the terminology. You've got to know graphics. You need to know history, and then communicate. You can't just say, oh, it's a regular collar. You have to say it's a pointed collar, it's a round collar, it's a Peter Pan collar. So I guess that was a highlight because I felt that communication happening.
And connection. You know,
Yeah.
so much about what our industry does, it does connect us with moments of our time and with other people. A lot of people who aren't in our industry consider fashion almost superficial. Sometimes it seems like a dirty word to be talking about fashion. Can you tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, the importance and the power of clothes and why it's more than a superficial concept?
You know, I always think even tribes that have no clothes decorate with leaves and body paint. Go to the museums, look at ancient Greece, ancient Rome. I mean, this urge to communicate and express ourselves with clothes, I think is a very, very deep human impulse. And it's certainly not superficial. I think I was telling you I was hearing on NPR about prisoners getting a new set of clothes when they're released because it gives them a feeling that they're starting a new life. Or there are homeless people. I follow this Instagram, Robbie Quinn, New York, and it's the best Instagram. And he had a crippled, you know, a disabled, homeless man who was an absolute dandy. How does that man put himself together every day? And that makes people feel seen. It makes people visible. I mean, we could go on. It's certainly not superficial.
It's a whole conversation.
That's a whole conversation
yeah.
in itself.
Well, we make daily choices. Even people like Steve Jobs, who chose to wear the same outfit every day. That's a choice. That's clothes. Clothes are fashion.
Well, some people like a uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like to disappear. And some people like to be seen. I always think I want to be noticed, but I don't want to be looked at. But some people love that. They want to stand out. And it's very personal. It's like you're dressing the inner you. You're dressing your subconscious.
Oh, I love that. One of the things that I think, and I talked about this as we were introducing you, one of the things that I think is a great gift that you have is this ability to just walk down the street and be inspired by graffiti or somebody walking their dog or at any moment in time, you're seeing culture and you're finding this connection between how that is going to inform fashion and what is around the corner. What are you seeing? How are you connecting those dots? How does culture inform fashion?
Oh my gosh, it's so deep. How does culture impact fashion? We are wearing culture. You know, we're wearing it. When I'm walking around, I mean, I had a boss many years ago, Toby Report, Marjorie Dean, who was one of those fashion doyens, and she used to say 3 times is a trend.
Oh, yeah.
So if you see someone wearing a fringe jacket, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then, sure enough, you see 1 or 2 more that week. That's a trend. But as I work on the trend, the craziest thing is it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and the dots start to coalesce. And we'll keep talking, and it'll become clear.
In today's shifting consumer values, how is that shifting our world of fashion?
Well, you know, I always tell students, I used to think about what people want to wear and what do people want to look like. And now I think, what are people thinking about? What do people care about? Right now, it's self-expression. I think a lot of it is, yes, the pandemic era was sweatpants and laying around the house in your pajamas, but there were so many great Instagrams where people were doing dance party in my bedroom or birthday party in my backyard, you know, and they put on a fancy cocktail dress that they haven't had a chance to wear. And I think that started a big movement toward self-expression, be you. And also we don't go into the office every day. The idea of appropriateness has changed so much. So,
That's great. I love the, wear what you care.
yeah, and also the world and ecology and sustainability, and I always relate it to food. Like now we care so much about what we put in our bodies. Cosmetics, Sephora's, what is it
Kind of
called?
transparency on there.
Yes,
So, yeah.
but we haven't quite gotten there for clothes. And if clothes are against your skin, do you really want toxic materials, or even to know that seamstresses are sleeping on the floor to make your t-shirt?
Yeah, you mentioned, you kind of read my mind, because I was thinking about global concerns and how that's finding its way into what we're wearing today. In addition to sustainability, are there other trends out there in the world that people are talking about, they're caring about?
Yes. Well, sustainability, yes. Safe practices, humane practices, yes. Post-Me Too, I think we went through a period where everything was covered up. I remember Ruth LaFurla for the New York Times did, instead of Little House on the Prairie, she did Little House in Bushwick, and it was all of these covered up dresses. Then that moved toward women really women and men, owning their sexuality, allowing to be very body con, but not to be an object, not for the male gaze, but to express something inner. And then, of course, gender identification has a huge impact globally on what we're all deciding to wear.
Okay, you've unpacked a lot of questions for me to follow up with. You mentioned this kind of embracing the body and that movement. Yeah, I think that our industry made a ton of progress with size inclusivity over the last several years. And I have concerns over a decline in that space as we look to the red carpet and what's happening with this Ozempic trend, kind of informing a revisit of the weight-like physique.
Yeah.
Do you think what do you think the impact is going to be, on the progress that we've made with size inclusivity, and is there a threat?
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think we've made so much progress in the size inclusivity that it's not going to go away. It's kind of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. But with visibility comes acceptance, and just seeing lingerie ads, many, it was Universal Standard, I think, started the trend of showing the same garment on many body types. And I'm still noticing that on websites, and it is a little scary. But I think with all of these things, it's not going to go away. Progress takes time.
That's absolutely right. Well, we have, politics and social influences also come into play and consideration, and I know politics can often be that dirty word and the thing you're not supposed to talk about. But there are times when, throughout history, there are plenty of examples of movements as a result of politics finding its way into fashion, and you don't even know it.
Totally.
Do you have some examples?
Yes. Well, one that I was reading about recently, which totally blew my mind, I'm going to show you one or two of my trend tales later. One of them is called The Makers, and I've been thinking so much about the artisanship of clothing. A few years ago, when I used the word artisan, people in the audience even asked me, what's that word? Like that, now we have artisan beer and artisan coffee. But I was reading about the word homespun, and when the settlers, during the federal period, there was a big movement to reject the silk, lace, and velvet of the
Luxury
luxury
of the elite.
of Europe.
Yes.
So the founding fathers and the society then actually started a movement for spinning, and women had spinning bees, like we've all heard of quilting bees. They were spinning their own yarn, and that was homespun, and George Washington wore a homespun suit for his inauguration. So that one just blows my mind, because we say, oh, it's homespun, but this was really spinning. It was also a way for women to be involved in politics. I'll tell you another one, just super briefly. Frida Kahlo. We always think of Frida Kahlo's beautiful Mexican outfits. She adopted the clothing of the Mexican folkloric. All the girls, I've seen pictures of these towns, and I can't remember the city. Every woman has that Frida Kahlo look. But where she was living in Mexico City, the people wore European clothes, but she was a passionate nationalist. She believed in Mexico, so she wore those clothes as a political statement.
My gosh, I didn't know that. I always, of course, love her style and her individualism.
Yes.
Yes. Thinking about some of the other things that our politics are inspiring conversation behind right now. You had mentioned in a previous statement about diversity and gender. We saw a wonderful gender blurring trend that rose over the last several years, providing much more freedom in clothing. And there's a conversation around that right now. Do you think that there's any threats to progress being made in that arena?
Well, the interesting thing is when you look at genderful is the word we use. When you look at genderful clothes, they are the classics. It's a blazer, it's a shirt, it's trousers, it might be a pleated skirt that a man or a woman could wear. So those clothes are very appealing for everybody, and I don't think it's going to go away at all. It's just, it's so funny because people get so upset about boys wearing girls' clothes, and it's just clothes. So,
Right, absolutely.
and many designers, during Men's Week in particular in New York last week, many designers called their collections agender or, for everybody.
So fashion can be a good source of rebellion or standing up for your beliefs.
Totally.
A peaceful rebellion, if you will.
Yes.
Are you seeing other areas where peaceful rebellion are finding its way into styles that are hitting the streets?
Yeah, I think it's anytime you reject the status quo, you're rebelling, and well, I was saying, we were talking earlier about the 80s, for instance, when it was so split. There were people, it was the dynasty 80s,
Right.
with padded shoulders and glitz. And
Kind of like what I'm wearing today.
yeah, you can see a little dynasty. Maybe I need a safety pin. I'm more the punk, safety pins and ripped clothes. It's also rebellion not to engage. I mean, how as business are we going to absorb the cyclical, fine used clothes, not engaging in shopping so much? There is a turning away from shopping, which is a rebellion against the system. And we still need to have our business, and we employ a lot of people.
True, yeah,
So we're a very important
industry.
industry.
Yeah, especially when you look at the entire supply chain, you know, it's not
Uh-huh.
just the clothes in the end.
I believe it's the fourth biggest industry in the world.
You mentioned counterbalances, you know, the glitz and the punk. And there's countless examples throughout history of showing, you know, when one trend rises, there's something else pulling against it. In looking at radical expression and quiet conservatism, that's kind of a conversation right now. How do they coexist, and how can they coexist?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, and I always think about this word conservative because many times people think a covered up look is conservative. But I think right now, you know, if you look at the avant-garde clothes, if you look at Ray Kawakubo of Comme des Garçons, Martin Margiela, or many avant-garde designers, Loewe, it's a covered up look, but there's experimentation in the shape. So conservatism could, right now, be more of a traditional kind of sex pot look. That might be an expression of conservatism.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we're challenging the words altogether and what they
Yeah.
mean.
What do they mean? Maybe we say modest for a covered up look, but it's not necessarily conservative.
But even modest, I think some of the trend makers that I know that dress modestly can be far more creative. The ways that they're exploring their expressions, so.
That's exactly what I mean, yeah.
Hey, what surprises you most right now about what's happening in our industry?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think one kind of negative surprise is that I didn't think fast fashion would last for so long, and I thought it was beginning to go away. In a way, you know, if you guys are on Instagram, did you ever see that little clip of Vivienne Westwood saying, "Buy fewer clothes, buy what you love, wear them to death. Buy that designer piece, wear it to death." But instead, we've got lots of cheap clothes, landfills, wear it once, throw it away.
Right.
So the throwaway side of things surprised me. In terms of what things look like,
I know, these are hard-hitting questions.
I know.
I agree with you on the concerns of fast fashion, you know, it not only its contribution to waste, but, you know, it's the challenges with, you know, de minimis, and there's so many conversations that we can plug into play here. The amount of product coming into the United States every day that are being flown in under this fast fashion, you know, de minimis clause. It's a very complex conversation, and one of the things that I'm encouraged by is that people are becoming more aware. They want to buy better. They want their investments to count. So I think that that's a beautiful thing that's happening, and that supports more local.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's kind of a hopeful note, which transitions to my next question. What are you most hopeful for in our fashion future?
I guess I'm hoping that people don't see fashion as superficial. I think fashion needs to take its place among the arts and among the important ways that we communicate with each other and express ourselves. And I'm hopeful that the customers get more educated about what they're buying. I'm hopeful that tags, I think there's so much opportunity to tell a story with hang tags. I think the consumer wants to know the story. It's like when you buy a fragrance, you want to know the mood, you want to know the notes. I think clothes are getting more that way.
Yeah, and I think you're right, that would help solve that problem of the allure of fast fashion, you know, by telling that story of the hands that made it.
Yes, and the minds that made it, you know.
Yeah, that's true. You know, thinking about how people do sometimes consider this industry of non-importance. You know, they're looking at the glitz and glamour of the runway. But the reality of it is that's just a small segment of the industry. How is it that how do they translate from that runway down to reality, down to what people are wearing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and a lot of my clients will use the term watering down, and I don't like that because I don't think it's a watered down version of the runway. But I think there's ideas on the runway, and I think what I do is try to help my clients see those ideas so they can make it their own and make it something their customer understands. So if the pants are getting wider, if they're big giant pants on the runway, we're looking at volume, more volume. We're looking at a silhouette, which is something we haven't really talked about. But really, so much of the shift in fashion is about the silhouette. It's not so much about the item itself. But so we're seeing this more volume. So how are you understanding that volume and making it appealing and wearable for your customer? And that's why fashion is for everyone. So I wouldn't say watering down, but reinterpreted.
Yeah, it's looking for source of inspiration.
Yeah.
You know, another great source of inspiration that we're seeing become a regular part of our process today is AI.
Yeah.
How do you see AI shaping future trends?
Well, I'm already seeing some things like there's all this kind of fantasy with AI, and then you see that fantasy reflected in like crazy sunglasses or mismatched prints and definitely fantasy colored hair and things like that. On a practical note, AI is helping designers have less sample waste and
Ideate.
exactly. Yeah, and I guess if you're a trend, I work more with my instincts, but I guess you can use AI to kind of scrape the internet and see how much pink there is or things like that.
Yeah, there's so many markers out there. Movies, you know, when the Barbie movie came out, and all of a sudden pink was everywhere.
Yeah, but no, it's funny, what came first? Because pink was already everywhere, but Barbie kind of reawakened it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, as we are looking for the seeds of what to come, and to an earlier statement, what can people look at to understand future trends? How can they themselves look at culture and things around them to inspire themselves in the world of design, or as they're making choices to get dressed for an event?
Well, yeah, good question. I mean, it's everywhere. One thing is watching movies and TV, like the Bridgerton moment, that was kind of already happening. This is Marie Antoinette, you know, when um, Sophia Coppola did Marie Antoinette, and then a few years later it's Bridgerton, all the costume dramas, and then, you know, that's kind of that opposite thing we were all laying around in elastic waist during the pandemic, but all of a sudden everyone's in a corset and a waist trainer. So, I mean, watch that. Watch what other people, not what just anyone is wearing, but what you notice when you're out and about. What are the pants shorter? Are you seeing more of a particular color? I went to a trade show in New York yesterday, and a friend of mine and I were talking about purple. And she texted me like, "Oh my God, I just saw 3 purple sweaters." And then I walked in and Mary was wearing a purple jacket. So something's going on with purple. So that's what you do. You know, you track it. I like to put, I collect images that I like, and I put them all in a folder. And then after I have a whole bunch of images, maybe 50, I go through my images and I start to see connections. I mean, that's how I work when I'm doing my
Yeah.
stories.
These images speak to you, yes. Well, I want to make sure that there's adequate time for everybody to ask questions. And I know that a part of this was that Sharon was going to give us an insight into some trends that she's been putting together. So let's go ahead and transition so you can share some of those highlights, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Oh, okay. So we'll show the trends first, and then we'll do questions. Okay, I'm just going to show you two.
Do you want me to share for you?
No, I'm good. This is spring 26, and I call the season Radical Joy because we need to claim that joy for ourselves. Yeah, good. So I like to map things. That's kind of one of my trademarks. So I map these. There are 6 trends. I'm just going to show you the first 2. I map them between the personal and the communal, and there's so much emphasis on community right now. And instant vintage. I mean, I could talk to you about all of these. These are my 6. So I'm going to show you the makers and the Gaia spirit. But I'll Save the Garden is, you know how Miranda Priestley says, oh, florals for spring, how groundbreaking. But there's always something new. I mean, that's what Jean-Paul Gaultier said. Always, you can always go back to the same inspiration, but you have to find something new in it. And then instant vintage is a continuation of a trend I did last year called Faux-stalgia, F-A-U-X, nostalgia. And it's a real term, and it's yearning for something you've never known, a time that you've never lived, and we're all experiencing it. And then Plaster Cast is about silhouette and pure design, and Madame X is like this powerful female sexuality, i.e. Schiaparelli, who really was a radical in her day. Okay. So the first trend is the makers, and this is my ripple. So I'm connecting things that are happening in society, things that are on people's mind with, in this case, what's the joy, since it's radical joy. Craft meets industry. So this is super important. This isn't hippie craft. This is craft with like grommets and hammers and things like that. Joy in creating. And this image is Louise Bourgeois, and she was a fiber artist. And as much as we're talking about AI, I was listening to somebody speak on, I don't know what it was, and they were saying the key art movement of our time isn't AI, it isn't EFTs, it's fiber art. And that just totally blew my mind. There's so many shows worldwide right now that focus on fiber art.
And that's great because, you know, as we were talking about, people are wanting to connect with their clothes again, and now you're literally connecting with this thing that's very textile, manual.
Yeah, because clothes are still handmade. That's the crazy thing. So this on the left is a Francois Gillot painting. She was Picasso's wife. I hate to say that because she was a wonderful artist in her own right. And this is Ella Emhoff on the right. She's Kamala Harris's stepdaughter, but she's a wonderful artist who uses knitting as her expression, and she uses upcycled yarns to knit these wonderful portraits. Look at the same pose, the same look. The look, it's a t-shirt, it's a pair of pants, it's ballet flats.
It's a uniform.
Joan Mitchell, same look, same pose. Is that incredible? So fashion doesn't have to be this big statement. It's what you wear. Maybe, and we're talking about it too, maybe the word is apparel. Maybe we should stop saying fashion. Maybe it's clothing. Mutual Prada said, I don't like fashion, I love clothes. And I think that's where to be. This is Lee Krasner, thank you. Same pose, same look. Ballet flats, pair of pants.
Multiple generations.
Multiple times, years. Back to Francois Gillot, thinking about primary colors. You know, you might think, oh, primary colors, they're so boring, they're so everyday. But primary colors could be very sophisticated. And thinking about primary colors, thinking about Alex Katz and his wife Ada. This is the first portrait he did of Ada, and this is a more recent one. So she's not the artist, but she's the muse. And then thinking about orange, which is a secondary color, and this is Grace Hardigan, another one of the 9th Street women. They were a group of female abstract expressionists who were only recently getting their due. Am I getting to, so it's all connecting. And I didn't know when I started the Makers that it really was about all of these female artists who and Grace Hardigan had a uniform of a peasant blouse and a full skirt. And all of these looks are timeless and they're back. This image on the left were the female surrealists. It's Lee Miller and a few other ladies. And on the right is the Matthew Blasi collection, much lauded collection for Bottega Veneta. Tell me he didn't look at this picture. I mean, so that's what I try to do is and this was from a surrealist, they called it a surrealist holiday. They were all on vacation over the weekend. I try to get into the brains of what, even if Matthew Blasi didn't work from this image, maybe he saw it, but I'm sharing it with my clients and with the students so you can start to think about where do these ideas come from. This is a brand new collection for Liberty. They hired an older designer, and I can't see my notes and I forgot his name, but it's a brand new collection, and this looks like a vintage. So all of these graphic prints, these handmade prints, and you see the beautiful palette of primaries and secondaries. I also thought about mending and how mending used to be a light skill that was taught in school. I'm even too young to have home ec. I mean, home ec was a million years ago. But mending is a light skill. It's like cooking. People need to know how to mend. This book is called Mending and Repair in a Throwaway World.
I like how now you're seeing visible mending too.
Visible, super important. And then, of course, Louise Bourgeois, who used textiles. She couldn't bear to throw out her grandmother's dish towels and things like that, and made them into wonderful art. Some of Louise Bourgeois' books, Louise Bourgeois, and then on the right, you see Christian Winjans from Spring 25, Christian Winjans and Georgia O'Keeffe. I'm just showing you how this look of just, you could say, oh, it's just a woven shirt, but it's not. It's the way it's worn. It's the intention. It's style. This is style. And then a little bit of pink. This is Georgia O'Keeffe's closet on the right. It was at the Brooklyn Museum. She found a little wrap coat at what's the big store in Texas? Is it Neiman Marcus? It was a model's coat that the models wore in between, and she had her dressmaker make it in every color. So she kind of did the wrap dress before Diane von Furstenberg. And then on the left is a look from Prada, simple pink shirt dress. So pink is part of the story. Elaine de Kooning's self-portrait, look at that little pink table. So here we are. So that is kind of my whole thought process to get to this trend, the makers, time-honored methods for a new generation. And in a way,
lot of women that are inspiring that.
yes. And, you know, I really came up with this idea because I was in LA and I was in a Korean store, I don't know the name of it, but they were selling kits for phone cases. So it was kind of handmade, but it was industrial because it had all these little grommets and metal parts. So these are the values of the customer: authentic materials, true workwear influences, renewed interest in skilled trades. That's something that's happening in society. Training electricians, training plumbers, clothing as tools. You can't function without that piece of clothing. And then a trend board, and then another map, mapping out a lot of things that we already talked about. This is what it starts to look like from the runway. So I'm showing you all the thought processes until you get to this fabulous look from Miu Miu. And you start to understand it's not just clothes.
I'm thinking through my closet right now, how can I reconstruct that look?
I think we have a maker right in the front row. You're doing it. And then I do a haiku for every trend because a haiku is the most packed form of literature. So in this case, artful pattern maker meets industrial designer, canvas meets grommet. And this is wonderful look from Loewe on the right. And then the color palette. So now you see that pink and that orange and things that I was talking about. But it's not just red, white, and blue, but the colors have to tell the story too. And then what do the fabrics look like? They're sturdy, but we also have some of those hand-touched things. And then what are the prints and patterns, the yarn dyes, the flat florals? What does it look like for the contemporary customer? There's the grommets on the Prada skirt on the left. There's a whole lot of stuff going on with shirts and shirting. It's a hybrid. What does it look like on the street? I'm saying khaki is the new denim. So I like to come up with these, like, you know, something catchy. Should I show another one?
Yes, we definitely have time.
So this is Gaia Spirit, so it's the same thing. It's a ripple. It's one with the earth, mind, body, wellness. What is wellness right now? Sex positive. So every season I do something with nature. What makes it new this season? It was sexy nature. There was something going on with all of these gorgeous nature-derived looks that were very much about the body, joy in nature. And this is an image from a wonderful artist named Michaela Clark, I think it is. Again, I can't see my notes. It'll come to me. And she uses her own body, and she's kind of the anti-Ozempic model.
They're definitely sporting that nude dress that we're seeing.
Yes, exactly. So this is about the body. On the right is an image from Picasso, but very much expressing this kind of goddess feeling, sheer fabric, but doing this goddess feeling in an earthy way. You know, sometimes it's very overt, sexy. This is more women and men owning their sexuality. So you're expressing sexiness, but it's not for the male gaze. It's expressing something more inner. And then all kinds of detail. You know, chiffon isn't the only way to be sheer. It could be mesh. It could be very textural because we want these fabrics to imitate nature. So on a subliminal level, you have roughness and you have raffia and macrame and things that might feel like a leaf or feel like straw or feel like paper. So you have all of these textures. This is a wonderful artist, Simone Lay, on the right. And if you haven't seen her work, run, don't walk. And she uses African vessels as inspiration, and she uses clay, and she uses a lot of raffia to draw from the roots of villages in Africa. And then the goddess, and I purposely, I make these slides myself. I choose every image, and I show diversity no matter what. It's easier now. I used to keep a special file for people who could express some diversity. And the goddess in these wonderful colors, and I'll show you the colors. And then this is the Venus de Milo by Botticelli, but artists are reclaiming that Venus image. This is an image by Harmonia. Again, I'm drawing a blank on the last name, but isn't that incredible? And using Africanian, I think it is, mythology from the same period as Botticelli. So we're shifting the view from the Western view, which is happening globally in art, it's happening in fashion. I talked about Frida Kahlo. This was a recent editorial on the right. This is Diego Rivera's image of the lily vendor on the left, and a similar image from Frida Kahlo's friend Tina Mondazzi. So I can go on and on. I mean, it's like
Only from roots for inspiration.
So I say spiritual meets sensual in shades of earth, sea, and sky. And that was very important to me because I wanted to bring the blues into the palette because nature is always green. So again, dig for the newness. And so it's global influences, again, shifting that point of view away from the West toward more global. So it's not just the Grecian goddess. It's goddesses from around the world who, it's similar in a way. It's so interesting how these cultural things develop at the same time. Sexy, body positive approach, ethical and cruelty free, clothing as connection with nature, and I would say with self. So there's a mood board from a lot of these images I showed you already. And then the map, maybe the kindred spirit is the indigenous model, kind of chasing horse. And then terrestrial goddess protects ocean, earth, ocean, and sky, sensual meets spiritual. And this is a beautiful goddess that I found that was recently discovered in Iran, I think. Here's the palette. So again, it's a little unexpected. I don't want to give my clients a page of greens. So I really push to find the colors. They're like vegetable dye colors. And then the fabrics. And you could have lace here, you could have luxury here, but it gives you that dimensional, almost leafy feeling. And what are the prints? They're still tie-dye, but how do you make it new? What does it look like for the contemporary customer? Long over long layers, safari images and influences in new ways, watery sky kind of prints. What does it look like on the street? And lastly, I'll show you my some of my collages, because I always say people don't dress in trends. They dress to express themselves. They might have a maker's kind of look, or a Gaia spirit, or Madame X, and then they might layer on a dress, or a pair of briefs, which are very important right now with all the sheer bottoms, or it might be a straight skirt, or maybe it's a wrap skirt. Maybe it's a different body type. Maybe it's pregnant. A t-shirt, a sheer dress. Sheers, that was from my garden trend. Khaki is the new denim, as I said. A skirt from Gaia's Spirit, trimmed in lace. Also from Gaia's Spirit, this watery kind of print in the sheer fabric. some collectible piece that Emily would wear. I had to do an I Love New York t-shirt. Lots of accessories, a thatched roof hat like Simone Leigh would do. Maybe it's a man. Fashion is for everyone. Maybe he's wearing a skirt. And I believe in the small handbag coming up. And no, you're never too old to wear it. Age is a non-issue. And that's it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I love the freedom of expression that we're seeing. The other thing I'm seeing is that female empowerment that, what's interesting, you talked a lot about sexiness, but it's not sexy to flatter, it's a different kind of sexiness.
Yes, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, oh, it's not flattering. And a lot of, remember the show Girls? Did you guys watch that show with, I've been talking so much, I'm drawing a blank.
Allison Williams and,
Yes, yes. And wearing those unflattering clothes, and it's unflattering is a rebellion. Flattering to who? So people are like, I just want to wear it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's this thing with owning your own sexuality. You know, I mean, in New York, in the summer, when you were saying what surprises you about fashion, I mean, sometimes I cannot believe what I'm seeing. But on the other hand, I applaud the confidence and the spirit.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I agree. Well, I want to open it up to any questions that are out there, and I think that there's probably some that might be coming in remotely, so the team, if you see anything come through, feel free to offer them up. Anybody have questions?
how does the whole forecasting and your clients, I don't know if you're able to name a client, but are the clients more fashion, more interior design? Could it even be a company that is not in those two industries that just wants to know how fashion could possibly influence Pepsi or Coca-Cola or advertising or whatever? Can you tell a little bit about the clients?
I mean, at the moment, I just have fashion clients and intimate underwear, lingerie. I have worked with home clients, and I've noticed a lot lately in color in particular. When you watch commercials, it's a very particular color palette, and they'll stick to it. You know, dad is wearing a blue t-shirt, mom is wearing a green one, the kitchen is blue and green, or it's very much. I have worked with car companies. We did a kind of this color, which people can't see on the screen, but like a fuchsia plum color. I worked on developing that for, I can't remember if it was Mercedes several years ago, but it was years in the making to think that they could do a kind of pinkish color. One color was a huge enterprise, whereas a fashion company could do experiment with a t-shirt in a new color. But right now I mostly work with mass market, very mass market clients.
Question.
Okay.
So there's two questions. The first one is, what trends are you noticing in jewelry accessory sector of the industry?
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, one thing I feel is the jewelry is kind of like a tattoo. It's very intimate. You wear it every day. I'm really seeing what I call the curated ear. Lots of earrings and very, very personal. That's one thing. And multiple rings and a lot of self-expression in the jewelry, but not too big. I'm seeing more delicate and jewelry with movement. So it goes with all that. I didn't talk about it today, but there's a lot of fringe and a lot of draping and clothing, and jewelry is kind of like that. And same with handbags. I'm seeing, I think it's a smaller bag, but also like a big tote for practicality, but a small bag, a crossbody bag, things that have movement, that don't weigh you down.
Great question. Hadley, there's one more, isn't there?
There's a third one that came in while she was talking. What is a current trend you think will fade quickly and one that has some staying power?
Current trend that will have staying power?
And one that will fade
Oh,
quickly.
yeah.
Oh, one that will fade quickly and one that will have staying power. That's an interesting one. I mean, you can always kind of tell the ones that'll fade quickly. I can't think right offhand, but like a couple of years ago, it was that off-shoulder top, you know, the Bordeaux top, or it'll be like the thing that everyone has to have. Oh gosh, what's one that will fade quickly?
Perhaps the, showing up to the red carpet with something completely shared?
Yeah, that. Yeah, I mean, new dressing is one thing, but I felt so bad because it was an opportunity for her to wear a pretty dress. It was so awful. Fading quick, yeah, maybe, that's a good one. I'm sorry, but, and then one that will have staying power. I think this basics, the makers, you know, when I first started in this industry, people used to call it the dumb basics, and I worked for the Toby Report, and we'd talk about the blazer or something, and the editors would say, oh, it's a dumb basic. But I have this thing of a killer basic. Like, if you're gonna buy a pair of black pants, it's the perfect black pant. So I think staying power is going to be tailored, more tailored clothes. The museum, the upcoming Met Gala is the theme is tailor made. So I think tailored clothes are gonna stick around. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not.
No, those are all great thoughts. You also mentioned workwear, and we've been seeing the rise of workwear, and that feels like it's getting.
Definitely. And workwear, not, you know, we used to call things you wear to work career wear, and now I notice everyone's calling it workwear, but I like the real meaning of workwear, which is the Carhartt and Red Wing, things like that.
And I think there was one more.
Yeah, and some more keep coming in. Oh, what is a trend you wish would come back?
Oh my God. Well, you know what? One thing that's interesting, and I know the writer for the New York Times criticized it, but I love the glamour, the old Hollywood glamour that's coming back, and that was visible in the Oscars. I mean, like fabulous hairdo, you know, coiffed hair, and just a really beautiful ball gown. I think that's really great. I think wearing shoes should come back instead of everyone wearing sneakers. Shoes, I'd like to see come back. Real shoes.
I agree.
And you're wearing them.
Suffer through the snow.
Yeah.
And I think there was, oh, yes, please.
And, yeah.
And also somebody else online.
No, please.
So I'm here, so I also work in trend forecasting, for Caleres, our local shoe company.
Caleres, yeah.
And yes, I started our brand new trend department, and I'm curious if something we, in our business struggle right now, is that the customer, and the buyers aren't ready to move on to the new things. A lot of our, retailers get kind of stuck on what works at LY, but we're obviously, from a trend perspective, trying to let them know that the consumer's moving faster now, obviously, like thanks to social media, everything else. I'm really curious, if you see that similarly and how you kind of combat that. Like, we're trying to figure out, we're putting all the trends out at the same time, we're showing them in dynamic ways. I make my mood boards and presentations and stuff too, and I think we're still kind of hitting that wall. So I'm curious if you've run into that, how you kind of convince your partners that you're working with, like how to kind of overcome those hurdles.
Well, it's kind of ever has been, and my clients have always, it's like the buyers and the designers are fighting all the time because the buyers don't believe in it.
Yeah.
And I find showing street images really helpful because it shows the real way. I mean, we talked about today Runway to Reality, And it's taking a chance. Nobody wants to shop because it's all so boring. So you're right. I mean, but that is, ever has it been. You're not the first one to encounter it.
Yeah, you've seen a real transition in some of the major department stores that you used to go to seek out what was next and what was relevant and what was happening, and you are seeing them pull back on taking a chance. So it is always really exciting when you maybe shopping a little bit more local and you see that experimentation.
But you test it, right?
Yeah,
You do
we try.
You do one.
Push our brand.
Yeah, it's hard. I know.
Yeah.
And and then all of a sudden it'll catch on with a vengeance, and you're like, we tried to do that 5 years ago.
But, yes, right.
I told you so moment. Yeah.
The visual communication too, I think, to the sales-minded people is always tough, because we have this kind of big vision that we can kind of see, going down the road of how it's working, from the macro, the trickle down and the trickle up, and so, yeah, making those connections, I think, to help tell them. I love that you said, including the story on the tags. That's something I really love too.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And
No, this is your question, please.
Oh, no, I once heard Marc Jacobs say, love it till you hate it till you love it. And it's so true.
Yeah.
It's like this thing that, the buyers are thinking, oh, this is the ugliest thing they ever saw. That's when you know it's going to happen.
I'm sure you run into that too. Like, we ran into that with fisherman sandals again this season. We were like, no, we do not want to see fisherman sandals for 26. But it's like, yeah, it's going to happen whether we like it or not.
One of the things that we often talk with a lot of our clients and partners is that it's always a balance too, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have those killer basics that are going to be the core of what drives your revenue, but you're going to have some of the fun stuff you're experimenting with that shows the fashion, that shows the trend, that gets people excited and connected with what you're doing. It's always a balance.
Yeah, and isn't that, I think, as women, and a lot of us can agree, that's the emotionality that makes it fun, right? Like, how do you not feel great in a fabulous pair of shoes?
Absolutely. Speaking of your
Oh.
fashion. Yes.
I'm curious, you have a lot of images from a lot of different places. Like, you have art, you have artists, you have runway images, editorials. Where do you look for images? Or what are the sources that you find the most valuable for finding images?
That's a good question. I usually know what I'm looking for, but I look at every fashion magazine online and download those images. And then something will just remind me. Luckily, I mean, I go to galleries, like, I would say twice a month. And today I showed you more 20th century artists, but I do. And also, I'm careful what I share, because I don't want to, if someone's not very well known, I don't want to share it. So I'm very conscious of, I call it like cultural literacy. I feel like I show things that people should know about. But where do I find everything online. I used to go to the library, get books out, have them professionally scanned. I mean, I can't, but now I'm like, blah, 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 but just, you dig out, you'll find your sources. Tumblr, you'll find them. And then you're always finding new ones. And start collecting them in a folder. My old business partner used to say, don't use the word folder, it's not sexy. But it's a folder. Put them in a folder or in real life in a folder. And then you start to see different directions happen, and you separate your folders into subfolders. And that's it.
Well, thank you, Sharon, for sharing all of your insights today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, those of you who are joining online. Sorry if I didn't get to all your questions. Leave them in the comments. We will make sure to follow up with you. Sharon, how can people find you?
Oh, I'm very easy to find. I'm Sharon at thesgfiles.com. And I have 3 Instagram accounts. Sharon Graubard, the SG Files. You'll find
We'll
me.
make sure to share those as well.
Sharon Graubard. and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn.
You'll find her, and we'll make sure to have links up so you can find her as well. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming too.
And thank you, Mary.
And can we get everyone to come up in this still group picture? Everybody that braved the cold and got out here and,